Imagine looking up at the sky. A single flock of birds stretching 300 miles long, completely blotting out the sun for days. The sound is a deafening, mechanical roar. They numbered in the billions, a biological empire that seemed entirely invincible. And then, in just a matter of decades, they were gone, reduced to a single lonely bird in a cage. How does a thriving species go from billions to absolute zero? Welcome back to Learning with Pratik. If you're new here, I try to increase neuroplasticity by exploring a new topic every day. I do all the reading and researching so you don't have to. Today, we are exploring a deeply fascinating story, the sudden, violent fall and the highly controversial impending genetic resurrection of the passenger pigeon. It's a look at our immense power to destroy nature and our complex, somewhat terrifying new ability to artificially rebuild it. Section 1. The billions to zero. Back in the early 1800s, passenger pigeons weren't just common, they were literally the most abundant bird in North America. We're talking about a density of life that sounds like pure mythology today. You could step outside, point a rifle at the sky without aiming, and have dinner. They made up over a quarter of all land birds on the continent. People genuinely believed they were an infinite, inexhaustible resource. But by September 1st, 1914, the unthinkable happened. The entire population was wiped out. Just one single 29-year-old pigeon named Martha was left. She died quietly in her cage at the Cincinnati Zoo. Her body was immediately packed in a massive block of ice and shipped off to the Smithsonian. It stands as one of the most stunning, rapid biological collapses in recorded history. So, how do you eradicate billions of highly resilient birds in a single human lifetime? That brings us to Section 2, Death by Railroad. You see, this wasn't some slow, natural fade into the fossil record. It was a violent disruption fueled by explosive technological advancement. For centuries, indigenous populations and early settlers hunted these birds locally. It was sustainable. It had a minimal footprint. But then, the railroad arrived. And right alongside it came the commercial telegraph and the refrigerated boxcar. Suddenly, the ancient barriers of time and distance just collapsed. A telegraph operator could spot a massive nesting site, instantly wired a location across the country, and within days, commercial hunters would arrive by train. They'd slaughter the birds and ship them back to the eastern markets on ice before the meat even spoiled. The passenger pigeon became a highly liquid industrial commodity almost overnight. The sheer scale of this mechanized slaughter is honestly hard to wrap your head around. A single professional hunter could take out 5,000 birds in one day. An entire, highly organized industry sprang up with one goal: feeding the rapidly expanding cities on the East Coast. Endless trains filled with tens of thousands of birds rolled into high-end New York restaurants like Delmonico's and into working-class markets that depended on cheap protein. It was an unstoppable extraction machine that operated completely unchecked until the skies were finally, permanently empty. Section 3. The Ecosystem Engineer. Wiping out the passenger pigeon didn't just remove a bird from our skies, it actually ripped out a massive, driving force of nature that had shaped eastern North American forests for tens of thousands of years. The famous ornithologist John James Audubon once described these massive flocks as acting like tornadoes. These weren't just birds sitting quietly in the woods, they were sprawling, nomadic megaflocks that acted as a constant, necessary environmental variable. They generated intense physical disturbances that the local plants and animals actually relied on to survive. Think of it like a controlled forest fire that clears out dead brush to make way for new growth. The passenger pigeon was literally a living, breathing mechanism of ecological renewal. This engineering happened in a violent yet totally vital four-step biological sequence. First, millions of birds would roost in one place, and their sheer physical weight would snap massive tree branches, thinning out the dense forest canopy. Second, they deposited tons of guano. While initially toxic in such massive amounts, this radically altered the soil chemistry, creating incredibly rich ecological hotspots over time. Third, the new sunlight piercing through the broken canopy hit that hyper-nutrient-rich soil, sparking rapid forest regeneration. And finally, this entire process yielded a massive biodiversity boom. They engineered a dynamic patchwork of habitats, clearing space for oak and beech trees and creating perfect conditions for insects, amphibians, and grazing mammals. Section 4. The Genetic Resurrection. Today, the glaring absence of this crucial ecological puzzle piece has sparked one of the most ambitious and controversial scientific missions of our time. We're now asking if we can actually undo our greatest ecological mistake. Spearheaded by an organization called Revive and Restore, scientists are using cutting-edge synthetic biology to attempt the impossible, bringing the pigeon back from the dead. It's an incredible process. They start by sequencing highly degraded DNA from decaying museum specimens, like the toe pads of birds preserved for over a century. Then, they use CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing to splice those extinct traits into the living genome of a close relative, the common domestic rock pigeon. By using these rock pigeons as living surrogates to incubate the embryos, the goal is to breed a genetically resurrected generation before the year 2025. It is an absolutely staggering leap in genetic engineering. Section 5. The Conservation Dilemma. Moving de-extinction from science fiction into scientific reality forces us to confront some very harsh limitations. The financial costs and the ecological threats are profound. Resurrecting a species from the void isn't cheap. It requires highly specialized labs, decades of trial and error, and massive surrogate breeding programs. Based on comprehensive models, bringing back the passenger pigeon is estimated to demand nearly $29 million over a 10 to 15-year timeline, and that's actually on the cheaper end. Larger projects like the woolly mammoth demand over $47 million. These aren't just one-time fees. They are sustained, massive financial commitments. Vast amounts of private and public capital are pouring into de-extinction science, with the passenger pigeon alone consuming nearly 29% of these specific research resources. And this presents a massive opportunity cost. Think about it. That $28.7 million could theoretically be used right now to protect thousands of critically endangered species that are still alive, animals fighting for survival in our rapidly shrinking modern habitats. Every dollar spent chasing a ghost is a dollar not spent on anti-poaching units or habitat preservation for animals currently teetering on the brink. And the costs aren't strictly financial. Ecological modeling warns of severe, cascading risks if we ever actually release these resurrected birds into modern environments. They score a highly concerning 8.2 out of 10 for disease transmission risk. Why? Because lab-born birds would lack thousands of years of evolved immunity to contemporary pathogens. They also risk outcompeting our fragile existing forest birds for food and nesting space. And perhaps most critically, these new birds would have zero generational behavioral traditions. The passenger pigeon was an intensely social creature. It learned migration routes and foraging strategies directly from the flock. A lab-created bird wouldn't actually know how to be a passenger pigeon. Because of all these compounding factors, a staggering 78.4% of surveyed conservation biologists agree on one fundamental point. De-extinction diverts crucial resources, vital funding, and public attention away from the gritty, unglamorous work of saving the ecosystems we still have. The deep fear here is that we're prioritizing a glamorous scientific moonshot over the very real species we are losing today. Section 6. Reversing the irreversible. We find ourselves standing at a profound crossroad, looking backward at a deeply tragic history and forward to a completely uncharted synthetic future. So, the ultimate question is this: should we play God to resurrect the ghosts of our forests, or focus all our resources on saving the species we are actively losing today? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, especially if you have something particular in mind. Thanks for watching. Tomorrow we open a different page. Until then, Pratik out.